It started innocently enough. My wife, Sarah, and I had been married for 5 years, and life had settled into a comfortable rhythm. Like most couples, we had our share of ups and downs, but overall things were good. We had built a life together that was steady and reliable. There were times when the predictability of it all felt a bit dull, but we were content. I never imagined that anything could come along to threaten the foundation of our relationship. Each day followed a familiar pattern. We'd wake up, go to work, come home, share dinner, talk about our day, and fall asleep in each other's arms. There were moments when we laughed so hard our stomachs ached, and we had long, intimate conversations that covered everything from trivial matters to our deepest hopes and dreams. It was comforting to know that no matter what, we had each other. Our love wasn't perfect, but it was ours, and that was enough. Then the new neighbor moved in. He was a man in his early 30s, tall, confident, and undeniably attractive. I noticed him the moment he arrived. The way he carried himself, the ease with which he commanded attention. It was impossible not to notice him. But at first, I didn't think much of it. I trusted Sarah and felt secure in our relationship. A new neighbor was just that, a neighbor, and I had no reason to worry. Sarah, ever the friendly one, started chatting with him over the fence. They'd exchange pleasantries, laugh, and talk about whatever was happening in the neighborhood. It seemed completely normal at first. After all, we had friends over all the time. I wasn't the jealous type, and I didn't want to be one of those husbands who jumped to conclusions without reason. But then, small things started to shift. At first, it was just casual mentions of Tom. The neighbor next door invited us over this weekend. Or, Tom said he loves our garden. Little comments, nothing unusual. But then the frequency increased. I was talking to Tom today, he mentioned this new thing he's trying in the garden. Or, Tom's having a barbecue. Maybe we should go. What started as innocent mentions soon became more pointed. The way she said his name, the sparkle in her eyes when she spoke about him, the warmth in her smile. There was something in her tone that made my stomach twist. It wasn't about Tom himself. He was charming, easygoing, and genuinely likable, but it wasn't him that was bothering me. It was Sarah's response to him. I couldn't help but notice the little things. The way she lingered longer in conversations with him, how she laughed a little too easily at his jokes, how she seemed to make excuses to be outside when he was. It was subtle, but it was enough to make me uneasy. Over time, things between Sarah and I started to change. She became more distant, more withdrawn. The long conversations we used to have grew shorter, more strained. The intimacy we once shared seemed to evaporate. I tried to talk to her about it, but every time I brought it up, she brushed it off. "You're being ridiculous," she'd say with a laugh. "Tom's just a nice guy. You have nothing to worry about." But I did worry. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. There was a shift in the way she looked at me, the way she avoided my gaze, the way her mind seemed to be elsewhere even when she was in the same room as me. I wanted to believe her when she said everything was fine, but deep down, I knew it wasn't. Then, one evening, everything came crashing down. I'd been working late and decided to surprise Sarah by coming home early. The house was eerily quiet when I walked in, too quiet. Normally, I'd be greeted by the sound of her humming in the kitchen or the TV playing softly in the background. But tonight, there was nothing. I called out to her, but there was no response. My heart began to race as I moved through the house, checking the rooms, calling her name. When I finally reached our bedroom, I pushed open the door, and what I saw stopped me cold. The room was a mess. Clothes scattered across the bed, Sarah's clothing mixed with someone else's. At first, I thought maybe she'd been cleaning, or maybe I'd left something out. But then I smelled it, the unmistakable scent of someone else. It wasn't subtle. I knew it immediately. My stomach lurched, and a wave of nausea washed over me. I didn't want to believe it, but everything inside me screamed the truth I didn't want to face. The weight of dread settled heavy in my chest as I stood frozen in the doorway, unable to move, unable to think. I felt like the world was collapsing in on me, but I couldn't turn away. My mind raced with disbelief, but my instincts told me exactly what was happening. I knew I shouldn't look, but I couldn't stop myself. I walked slowly toward the window, my legs unsteady, my heart pounding. With trembling hands, I pulled back the curtain, and there they were, Sarah and Tom, walking hand in hand down the street. Their laughter echoed in the quiet evening air, a sound that used to be mine to share with her. The way they looked at each other, so carefree, so full of joy, sent a jolt of pain straight to my gut. It was the kind of joy I hadn't seen in her face for months, and I realized in that moment that it was no longer meant for me. I stood there, frozen, my eyes glued to them as they walked further down the street, oblivious to the devastation they were causing. I don't know how long I stayed there, staring at them, but it felt like an eternity. Sarah was smiling at him, a smile that was different from the ones she used to share with me. It was lighter, brighter, too bright. Her laugh was full of something I hadn't heard in ages. For a moment, I almost didn't recognize her. This wasn't the woman I had married, the woman I had built a life with. This was someone else, someone I didn't know. They disappeared into his house, and in that moment, the reality hit me like a ton of bricks. Sarah had left me. She had chosen him over me. My mind was spinning. How had this happened? How could she betray everything we had built together? I had given her my heart, my trust, my love, and now it all felt like it had been ripped away in an instant. I stood in the same spot for what felt like hours, my hands trembling as I reached for my phone. But I couldn't call her. I couldn't bring myself to speak to her, because what was there left to say? The betrayal was too raw, too fresh. I felt numb. My mind replayed images of her and Tom over and over again. I didn't know where she was, what she was doing, or if she even cared. The thought of her with him was unbearable. Days passed in a haze. The house felt empty without her, the silence suffocating. I wandered aimlessly, lost in my own thoughts, the echoes of what had happened reverberating in my mind. The life I had built with Sarah seemed like a distant memory, and every step I took only seemed to deepen the hole in my chest. Then, one evening, my phone rang. It was her. Her voice sounded fragile, almost apologetic. "I'm sorry," she said, her tone shaky. "I need to talk to you." I didn't want to hear it. The betrayal was still too fresh, too painful. But part of me needed to know the truth, to hear her explanation, even though I knew it wouldn't make any difference. When she walked through the door, I could see it in her eyes. The guilt, the regret. But it was too late. She sat down on the couch, her hands wringing nervously. "I made a mistake," she said, her voice soft. "I should never have left. I don't want to be with him. I realize now that you're the one I love." I stared at her, the emotions rising inside me like a storm. Anger, hurt, confusion, all tangled together. But there was one thing I knew for certain. I couldn't take her back. Not after everything she had done. She had shattered my trust, and no amount of words could undo that damage. "I can't do this anymore, Sarah," I said, my voice steady despite the chaos inside me. "You can't just come back when it's convenient for you. You don't get to make me your backup option. Only choose me when things don't work out with him." Her eyes widened in disbelief. "What are you talking about?" she asked, her voice pleading. "I love you. I made a mistake. I want to fix this." "No, Sarah," I replied, shaking my head. "You don't get to decide that. You left me for him. And now, because it didn't work out, you want to come back? That's not how love works. You can't just walk away and expect everything to be the same when you return. I'm not your second choice. I deserve more than that." She was silent for a long time, her face etched with regret and confusion. I could see the weight of her actions pressing down on her, but it didn't change anything. The hurt was too deep, and the trust was gone. "I've already filed for divorce," I continued, my voice firm. "It's done. There's no going back." For the first time, I saw the full weight of her realization. Her face fell, and I knew she understood that she had lost me for good. She looked at me, eyes filled with sorrow, and whispered, "Please, don't do this. I'm sorry. I'll do anything to make it right." But it was too late. The damage had been done. I couldn't undo the images that had been burned into my mind. Of her with him, laughing, walking hand in hand. I had trusted her, loved her, and she had thrown it all away for a fleeting moment of excitement with someone else. I'm not a backup, Sarah, I said, my resolve unwavering. I deserve better than to be the person you come back to when things fall apart. I'm moving on, and you should too. She didn't say anything more. She just sat there, silent, as if the weight of her choices had finally hit her. Slowly, she stood up, walked toward the door, and left. As the door closed behind her, I felt a strange sense of relief wash over me. It was over. For good this time. It wasn't easy, and it certainly wasn't painless, but I knew I had made the right decision. I wasn't going to let anyone dictate my happiness anymore. The next chapter of my life was mine to write, and I wasn't going to let anyone else take control of that.